All right. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, so this is something that training that I wanted to do to really it helped me think through and process just some thoughts from a financial standpoint. Um, we've all had this conversation, and I think this will be a debate in this industry forever. And the debate is, well, why should I use my cash flow and my extra monies and my extra dollars to pay off debt, especially a mortgage, when I can get a higher rate of return and use those dollars to build wealth and all that? And I've always had this like thought process of like, there's some truth to that. There's like, should we only focus on that? And then I thought like, well, like, yeah, 3%, 2.5%, 4%. Like we've all been taught from the banking system and Wall Street, and like that's like free money. And so the inner nerd a couple weeks ago came out, and for those that know me, know like I could get super hyper focused on something, and I'm typically not like a super analytical guy. I'm more of a visionary. But when it comes to math and breaking down the numbers of what it could mean for the future, and I can get really nerdy about it. So I said, you know what? This would be a good training for my team. Let me break it down and do some what ifs and really break down the math. And again, this could be a debate that goes on forever. But the math is the math. And I wanted to just share this with you and take you through some serious like examples. And here's what I'm going to preface it with. No voodoo math allowed. Apples to apples, not apples to oranges. And you'll understand what I mean by that. Apples to apples comparison of, should I eliminate my debt, especially that mortgage, that's such a great interest rate, or should I use my monies to invest and get a higher rate of return? Now, I'll close with saying I've been taught by some very astute financial advisors to stop chasing rate of return because you'll never catch it. So hear me on that. That's a different subject for another day. It is about eliminating the eroding factors in your life, eliminating things that help you not create wealth. You want to get rid of that stuff so that you can create wealth. And one of the biggest eroding factors of wealth is debt. That's a fact. And one of the biggest eroding factors of life is debt that cripples you so you can't live your life and have financial freedom and plan and do things better for your future and your legacy. That's the inner. Now, that being said, let's look at something. I'm going to share my screen, and I don't have a PowerPoint, but I have a whole bunch of data and stuff that was really eye-opening to me. First thing I did was just do a little research. 3% mortgages. Guys, our market is so humongous, it's not even funny. Only 22% of mortgages in this country right now are even lower than 3% anyways. So that debate doesn't really matter to me anyways, but that's incredible to understand. Look how many are below 5%, below 4%, below 6%, right? The average mortgage rate is at 6.66% in this country right now. So yeah, we're going to show the debate and talk about the debate of, should I pay off debt or should I invest? And man, this was just really eye-opening to me when I really did the math of it. But I thought I'd start there and say, know the market. Take a screenshot of this if you don't have it, right? I just Googled it, so you can find it yourself. But that was really amazing to me. So here's what I did. I took 2 sample clients. Standard sample. This was actually me pretty much when I first got on the program in 2019. Called it Sample Prospect, right? And let's look at the math of this. And then I have a little Excel sheet that breaks it down. Their mortgage. And I think this is good to just understand, right? So their mortgage, two mortgages, got a little loan, some credit cards. They're spending $3,000 a month. That's money they'll never see again. That is money that's flowing away from them every single month, not staying inside their economy and helping them eliminate and build wealth. It's flowing away. They'll never see it again. That's actually $36,000 a year. So if they were debt free right now, this client, that's 36 grand a year that they could use for other things. But they can't because it's in the way, right? We all know this. Now, to be fair, of this 2967, told you when I want to be a math dork, I can be. About $300 of it was escrow, which is taxes. You know, right? It's always going to be there. It is what it is. So not all of it can be completely eradicated because you got taxes and insurance, right? So that is part of it. But most of it can be. So this client, let's just has the debate of, because his financial advisor says, no, 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 no. Don't pay off the debt. Most of your debt's great interest rate because they're so conditioned by the very banking system and Wall Street that controls them. I can get you a better rate of return. Now, we have been taught that's really not about the rate and payment. It's not about the rate itself. It's about the volume of interest that crushes you. But let's just play this game for a minute. Don't pay off this 4% mortgages because I can get you a better rate of return. So what you want to do is, Mr. Client, instead of using that $732 a month to help you pay off your debt, because that's what the system's going to be doing, let's use that money and make you more money, and you'll be better off. Awesome narrative, right? Because I can get you better rate of return. You're going to live a better life. You can keep that mortgage 30 years, keep that debt 30 years. You'll probably buy another car. You'll probably buy some more credit card stuff, but don't worry about it. Because get you a better return. So let's look at that. Okay, so this is the first client I based it off of. And let's just look at the math. Option one, right here, is I want you to keep that 4% mortgage. Part of that is 1671 that goes to P&I. You got the car loans, credit cards. The discretionary income is 732.44. Now, I'm showing an average, because that's what they're going to base it on. Hey, average growth of 7%. We're going to use that 732.44. And here's what I'm going to say on that, first of all. They base their projections, most financial tools and most financial people, on some sort of made up, well, I shouldn't say made up, on an average rate of return. Sometimes it's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? I'm using 7%. Hear me out on this. This is pretending that 732.44 every month is going into some sort of investment, some sort of fund that is getting 7% a year, because that's what it's based on, is the average. There is a big difference between average and actual. Like what actually happens, which is some years it's 20%, some years it's negative 2%. Some years it's 4% because it didn't do that great. The next year it's 50%. Oh my God, that's amazing. And then the next year it's down 25%. The next year it's down 18%. Oh, it then went up again 20%. So your average is 7. But just to make this like, hey, let's just base it on projections. You're going to get 7% growth every single year, never going down, which is some financial products, claim that. And that's what the results are going to be. So if you did that for 30 years, you're left with $861,000 that it grew to. Sounds pretty good. $732 is the discretionary monies, and $2,600 or whatever. So combined, you're spending all this money combined. And this is what I meant by apples to apples. Okay. For 30 years, after 30 years, congratulations, you own a home. Probably paid off the car loans and credit cards as well, too. It's been 30 years. You've paid $286,000 in interest. You're left in your retirement account or your investment account or whatever else you got there, getting 7% a year with $861,000. For 30 years, you were shackled to those mortgage payments and credit card and debt payments. But after 30 years, you got almost $1 million. Pretty cool. Option 2, which I call the freedom option. That client that I showed, which just to reiterate again, right here. Okay, so that's option 2, debt-free in 10 years. Now, you got to do this apples to apples to be fair, to do a real analysis. What do I mean by that? Well, in this example, $3,400 a month is flowing away from them. $2,900 or whatever that was in all the debt payments, and $732 going to the investments, right? So you have to be fair. And I took out the taxes and insurance, right? That's why it's only $3,400, not like $3,600 or whatever. Okay. So if that happens, you are debt free in 10 years with option 2, the money max account, or whatever other debt elimination strategy a client would have. They're debt free in 10 years. So that means now they have the full $3,400 a month to do what they need to do with. And I'm doing that because it's got to be apples to apples, to be real math, not voodoo math. It's got to be the same number that's flowing out. Okay. So if you compare the two, and someone's going to say, well, Brian, they're not going to use all their money when they paid off the debt. They're going to use $3,400 and invest. Well, wait a second, Mr. Take your money, or Mrs. Take your money and invest. That's what they're doing up here with your projections, because they're paying their debt and they're 732 discretionary. You want them to invest. So all I'm doing is saying it's the same math. It's the same numbers, except my client with the money max account is free in 10 years. Those shackles are gone. And on that note, here's a little challenge. In all my years of doing this, I've been in this industry in one way or another for almost 20 years. I have not met one person, and I've talked to thousands through seminars, things like that too, not one person that is completely mortgage free and completely debt free that wishes it wasn't true and that regrets it. Not one. And I'm bringing that up because you've got to understand the psychological part of this as well. The freedom of owing nobody is real. And then when you really do the real math behind it, it's hard to ignore. So this client is debt free in 10 years. You got 20 years of that 3439. If it's the same math, 7%, they're at $1.7 million. And they've only paid $93,000 in interest. Now watch this. What if we don't have the same type of return? Well, at 1%, it's 917. Oops, I don't know what I just did. Brian, what'd you do? Okay, phew. At 1%, it's 917. At 2%, it's over $1 million. So even at the lowest 1%, which is what our savings analysis shows, right? The 1% savings account, it still is more than the 861. That's extremely hard to ignore. Like I'm trying to be just like non-biased when I was doing this research, because I understand the debate that will forever be from advisors that say, never pay off your mortgage, don't worry about your debt, use your money to invest. And I'll say, that's not a bad idea. Let's get you free first. Now, there may be a mix of like, well, use some of your money to invest, some of your money to debt. But when you see the math, that's extremely hard to ignore. Okay. So that was that client. And then I took it a step further. And one of my clients, his name is Mickey Mouse. And, his father, Walt, wanted to buy the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, right? So I think I even named it there. Yeah, MM Clubhouse. Okay. And this is another client. And here's what I'm doing. I'm showing another example because I want to think about this for a minute. Mickey Mouse has a 3% mortgage, but then he has all this other consumer debt. So I wanted to show, like, well, you know what? Maybe he wanted to not pay off the mortgage, 3%. He has it in mind that's like free money. Okay. So let's just think about that. And by the way, it doesn't mean like I don't mean you have to have a mortgage free, but what if you could eliminate interest, build that equity quicker, and maybe you're going to use that equity to buy another property and then use the equity from another house and buy another property, or use the equity to invest in some venture, or use the equity to invest in whatever you want. You have the equity. These numbers that I'm showing on the Excel doesn't even include any of that. The freedom of not owing anybody is real. And then the numbers, man, it's hard to ignore. Hard to ignore. So this client, Mickey Mouse, has a $400,000 mortgage, has a car loan. He needs to help the power at Disney World, so he got a solar loan to get some solar in there. I'm just having fun with it. Visa card, MasterCard, okay, has a lot of debt. And so look at this client. $4,400 a month. Now, 400 of that is escrow, right? So let's say $4,000 a month is flowing away for them. That's $48,000 a year. Man, for 50 grand a year almost. That's a lot of money to invest to give you 50 grand a year back. Guaranteed, by the way, because if you get rid of the debt, it's guaranteed. Right? 50 grand a year. This client has, about $800 of discretionary. So I want to show you guys different things. One is, hey, pay everything off, don't have a mortgage payment, same example I showed. But then the other is like, well, Brian, I think they should keep the mortgage because it's such a low rate. Not the volume of interest, the rate. And I can absolutely do better than 3% in the market for them. So they should just pay off the consumer debt, but keep that mortgage, right? We have that conversation, right? All the time. So let's just look at the math. The first Mickey Mouse right here, option one, keep that mortgage 30 years. It's the same type of thing, but they have all these other debts. And I even went higher, pretending they got 10% growth every single year. After 30 years, they've paid $301,000 in interest. And they got $1.6 million in their account, in their growth account, wherever they are, their investments, etc. Pretty cool. Option two, completely debt-free in 9 years, which I forgot to show you guys that. But just so you know, my math is not wonky. 9.2. I forgot the 2.2, but it's no big deal, right? 9 years. Debt-free in 9 years. If the math is the same math, there is $4,800 a month after that because they were spending all this money on debt. They're not going to anymore. They're going to use it in their investments after they're debt-free. 10%, it's got to be apples to apples. No voodoo math. So in 30 years, do you think Mickey Mouse wants to have 1.6 million or 3.9 million? Now, what if he didn't get 10%? It's 2.6. What if he got 4%, it's 1.8. Again, that is still more than the 10% up here. It's just a math equation. I want you to really understand that, everybody. Which math seems better? Which math gets them out of bondage and living a life of wealth building and using their discretionary income to do better things and bigger things? Option 2. The third thing to think about is Mickey Mouse. Down here I say Mickey Mouse, keep the mortgage. Okay? So what does that mean? Well, in option 1, he's only going to care about the consumer debt. So that's gone in about 4 years. So he still has 26 years, right, left, and the discretionary income during that time, because all the consumer debt is gone, is now more, 2152. Well, still paid a whole lot of interest, 207 grand compared to 84. And you know what? He's got $3 million. Pretty cool at 10%. 10% is not going to be real because the average is not the same as the actual, but we're just pretending, keeping the math. But option 2, it's still more. And they're mortgage free in 9 years. Some of you are like, Brian, that math ain't mathin'. Yes, it is. Do it. Just make sure you're doing apples to apples, not apples to oranges. And what do I mean by that? Well, some people are going to say, yeah, but if you do the discretionary income down here, well, it's got to be the same. No, because it's the total money that you're spending. And now that money is freed up, you can do other things with it. Maybe you're gonna buy a rental property, right? Or maybe you're gonna do other, but that's wealth. So just to keep the math the same, you got to keep the math the same. And if you don't see this, holy cow, I don't understand. Right? Like, I'm not saying everybody has to have a mortgage paid off. I'm not saying you shouldn't build equity and maybe use that equity to buy another property or invest in other things. Please do that, because now your money's working for you. That's not a bad thing. But the debate of don't pay off your debt because I can use that money and get a higher rate of return. When I look at the math doesn't math up to me. And for those that want to know, like, you can do this simply, and I'll move it over. There's a lot of compound interest calculators online. I use this one, right? NerdWallet. This is the 2152 initial deposit. And every month, that discretionary income of 2152, right? 10% annually. And that's, it shows you 2.9 million, right? But if that was 4,800, because that's the first month, and then 4,800 every month after that. Years, right? This is really powerful when you actually understand it. I think it's really, really powerful. And when I took my team through this, Tom, Heidi, Steve, all leaders here, like, holy cow, it makes you think. And that's really all I got. It wasn't like a telling you guys what to do with your clients, but you gotta think through that math. And when you do, it's at least hard to ignore. And at least when that objection comes up, you can say, well, are you sure that math is what you think it is? Because I just did the math. I don't think it's what they think it is. That's all I got. Hope that helps.
All right, couple questions, couple thoughts. I know it's really difficult to run the actual, like you said, some years if you're going to average 10%, that's really a high average.
Right.
Some years you do get to 15 to 20, 25, but then some years you lose 10, 15, 20%, right?
Yep.
And I know because of fees, 10% or whatever you're going to get, they rape you. I mean, Sue's dad She's settling out his estate, and just these brokerage companies, man, they fee you to death.
Yeah, that's not even including any of the fees. That's not including any of that, right?
So my question to you, Brian, is this: I know you do a tremendous amount of work with investors, and today I met a person today for lunch, and this is what he does. And um, what do you tell people who are investors in multiple properties?
Mm-hmm.
What, because I know you've had great success with them, what do you really, because most of them don't want to pay off, they want to create equity to establish more properties.
Yeah.
How does that conversation typically go?
Yeah, typically it's so I never focus on you can have all your properties paid off in 5 to 7 years. When it's an investor type, I never focus on that because they have been conditioned in their own mind not to even care about that. Now, when they see it for themselves and they holy cow, I can have 17 properties paid off in 5.6 years. Well, maybe I should pay attention to that, right? Like that's after they've uh, got to the place where they're running an analysis and they're using the system themselves, all that kind of stuff. But to really have a great conversation with them, it's not about the debt elimination for most investors. It's about creating more cash flow, creating more equity faster to do more things with it. Right? If there was a way that you could eliminate the interest and get more cash flow on your properties and build more wealth and more equity so you can use that equity to get more properties sooner, would you want to see how that's possible, how you can do that? That's what they care about. Don't tell me I can get out of debt faster. I can get out of debt faster myself. I'll take all my rents and pay it off. What they want to use our system for is the forecasting and the planning and the ability to get more properties quicker and to plan it out where it will never hurt them. See, because the money max account won't fail them. It will show them exactly what those future decisions will be, their portfolio. That makes sense?
Does
So it's about building
how
equity so they can create more wealth.
how does the insurance side fit in to this what you did tonight? Or because you're showing those returns of you're not going to get 7-10% typically in a whole life policy, which is what you like.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to. That has nothing to do with that. That has nothing to do with that. That was to handle the objection of if you think you can get a better rate of return and not pay off your debt, well, let's just think about that math. Does that math up? Does that math make sense from a financial standpoint? Right? Because yeah, you probably can get a better rate of return on your investments over time, better than 3% rate of return. Absolutely. Does the math of that math up? Right now, what for me, yeah, I do a lot of like infinite banking type strategies with whole life and things like that. But that's a totally different. That's about eliminating interest, getting out of debt, building wealth, building your cash flow to create more, to become your own banking system. That has nothing to do with like what was tonight, because that's a totally different thing.
Have you had any success with people that are investors of getting them to also do the insurance side?
Yeah, a lot of them.
Because of the tax-free element.
Tax-free dollars and the art of becoming your own banking system. Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right, thoughts and comments. Anybody have any questions or anything they want to comment on what Brian shared tonight?
Great training as always.
I'll go ahead and unmute. So Brian, when you first started talking, I thought that you were going to say, why would you, pay off your mortgage at 3%? And, it's not really 3%, right? Because of the total interest percentage, it's probably, 60% or 70%. And that is the case. However, I think what you did was put that theory into practical numbers. You can kind of see why it makes more sense to pay off the mortgage because it's not the 3% that we think, because we are paying so much more in the way that it's loaded, and how all that interest, the tip, right, the total interest and the interest volume. And so I think that kind of answered that of like, we know on this call the difference of like interest volume and interest rate, but I think that that actually put it in the practical math that a client would see of how that goes, like, month to month, year over year. What does that look like going forward, and projecting that out 30 years? That's the difference that it makes. And I started telling clients, starting now makes a bigger difference. The sooner you start, the better, because you're paying so much interest at the beginning of these loans and very little at the end. So the longer we wait to start doing it, the more the math is working to your advantage already. But right now, most of us are all in these new loans, and so the first 20 years of a loan, it's of huge benefit for us to start getting the bank out of our pocket. And I think you just kind of proved that.
Getting the bank out of the way. And yeah, getting the bank out of the way. So does money compound better at $700 a month or $4,000 a month?
Doesn't matter. Math is math, right? So it compounds at the same rate.
Not the rate.
Well, compounding works the same, but if you only have 700 or 4,000, I'll take 4,000.
Right.
But it's compounding the same way. It's like, it's the same math.
Yeah, I don't mean the rate, the compounding rate. I mean, 700 plus 700 plus 700 is less than 4,000 plus 4,000 plus 4,000.
Right.
Yeah.
The more you have, faster, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Instead of only having 700 for 30 years,
right,
you end up having 700 for only 10 basically, and the rest of the time it's at 4.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, good point.
Yep.
Well done.